Before you watch this, understand one thing: this is not a movie. Everything you're about to hear happened inside a real British prison. If you're new here, subscribe now, because stories like this don't get told twice. At exactly 17 a.m., a scream ripped through the walls of HMP Belmarsh. By the time officers reached the cell, one man was already dying, and no one was talking. No cameras caught it. No witnesses stepped forward. And the prison locked down, knowing something far worse was coming. This wasn't a riot. It wasn't random violence. It was planned. And the men inside Belmarsh knew the truth long before the outside world ever did. Stay with me, because what happened next exposed how Britain's most feared prison really works, and why surviving inside it has nothing to do with innocence. Inside HMP Belmarsh, Britain's most feared prison, the alarm went off just after dawn, echoing through steel doors and concrete wings. Officers sprinted down the corridor as inmates slammed fists against their cell doors. By the time they reached the landing, one man was already dead. No witnesses, no weapons, just silence. At HMP Belmarsh, silence is how you stay alive. Belmarsh Prison, located in southeast London, is known across the UK as Britain's Guantanamo. It houses terrorists, gang leaders, organized crime bosses, and the most dangerous offenders in the country. Escapes are rare. Violence is not. Over the years, real incidents of inmate-on-inmate killings, guard assaults, and long-term solitary confinement have made headlines, but what happens most days never leaves the walls. Before the violence, there was routine. Prisoners locked in cells for up to 23 hours a day, meals pushed through slots. Tension building with every delay, every shouted insult, every unanswered complaint. Former inmates and inspectors have described Belmarsh as overcrowded, understaffed, and constantly on edge. Drugs circulate, gangs recruit, debts are collected quietly, often at night. In one real case, a prisoner transferred in for his own safety lasted less than a week before being brutally attacked by inmates who believed he had informed on someone. Officers later admitted they missed warning signs. The man had asked to be moved hours before the assault. That's the reality of Belmarsh. You don't have to be guilty to be targeted. You just have to be vulnerable. And when the doors lock at night, with guards stretched thin and tempers high, one question hangs over every cell block: who will still be alive by morning? By the second week inside Belmarsh, everyone knew the name of the man who died. Not because officers announced it, but because prisons have their own way of spreading news. A whisper through vents. A note slid under a door. A look held a second too long on the landing. The official report said medical incident pending investigation. Inside, inmates knew better. The man had crossed the wrong people. Belmarsh runs on invisible lines. Gangs based on streets, race, and old grudges control different wings. If you arrive without backing, you are already in danger. Protection costs something. Silence costs even more. The guards tried to restore order, but they were already stretched thin. Staff shortages meant fewer patrols. Cameras didn't cover every corner. Prisoners learned where shadows lived. That's where deals were made, and threats were delivered in calm voices. One inmate, transferred from another UK prison after cooperating with police, began refusing meals. He pressed the emergency bell repeatedly, asking to be moved. Officers logged the requests. Nothing happened. Cells were full. Paperwork moved slower than fair. At night, the prison changed. Daytime noise faded into a low, constant hum. Metal creaked. Someone cried quietly 3 cells down. Others banged doors for no reason at all, just to remind everyone they were still there. Then came the search, after intelligence suggested a weapon was hidden on the wing. Officers stormed through cells before sunrise. Mattresses were flipped, letters torn apart. One crude blade was found, wrapped in cloth and hidden inside a toilet tank. No one claimed it. That discovery made things worse. Whoever lost the weapon would want revenge. Whoever informed would be hunted. And everyone else was now a possible target. Later that afternoon, an argument broke out in the exercise yard. It looked small at first. 2 men shouting, others slowly stepping back. Guards moved in, batons ready, but not fast enough. The fight ended abruptly when one prisoner collapsed, gasping, eyes wide with panic. No punches were visible, no blade was seen. He survived. Barely. That night, cells were locked early. The prison fell into an unnatural quiet. Officers knew something was coming. Prisoners felt it too. You could sense it in the air, like pressure before a storm. In one cell, a man sat on his bunk staring at the door, replaying every conversation he'd had since arriving. Every look. Every word. He realized too late that someone had marked him. When footsteps stopped outside his cell, he held his breath, and then, somewhere down the wing, a scream tore through the darkness followed by the unmistakable sound of steel slamming against steel. The scream didn't last long. In Belmarsh, screams rarely do. What followed was worse, the silence that comes when everyone understands something irreversible has just happened. Officers reached the wing within minutes, boots pounding concrete, radios crackling with clipped voices. A cell door stood half open, its lock damaged. Inside, the scene told its own story. Blood on the floor, a broken chair leg, a man slumped against the wall, breathing shallow, eyes unfocused. He was alive. But only just. Whoever attacked him knew exactly when to stop. The wing was sealed. Prisoners were ordered back into cells. Some obeyed quickly. Others needed force. Doors slammed shut one by one until the corridor became a steel tunnel again. Behind those doors, men sat on bunks, replaying the scream in their heads, wondering who would be next. The injured man was taken to the prison hospital wing, then rushed out under guard. By morning, word spread that he'd survived surgery. That should have calmed things. Instead, it made them worse. Survival meant questions, questions meant informants, and informants don't last long in places like Belmarsh. The governor ordered a lockdown. For days, prisoners were confined almost constantly. Exercise was cancelled. Visits were postponed. Tempers boiled over. When men are trapped together with nothing but their thoughts, fear turns into anger. Small arguments flared. Officers broke up fights that seemed to come from nowhere. During one cell search, guards found handwritten notes hidden inside a Bible. Names, times, wing numbers. It looked like a list. No one could say for sure what it meant. But intelligence officers took it seriously. Someone inside was organizing something larger than a single attack. Meanwhile, the man who had been attacked before, the one who asked to be moved, was finally relocated, not to safety, but to segregation. A concrete cell, a solid door, 23 hours a day alone. Officially, it was for his protection, and officially, it was because no one else wanted responsibility if he ended up dead. Segregation broke people. Former inmates would later describe how time loses meaning there. No voices, no routine, just the sound of your own breathing and the echo of doors opening for others, never for you. That isolation made men desperate, and desperate men talk. Back on the main wing, tension peaked when officers intercepted a message hidden inside a food tray. It mentioned the date. No context, no names, just a number circled twice in red ink. The date was 3 days away. Extra officers were brought in. Riot gear sat ready. The prison prepared for violence it couldn't fully see. Everyone felt it, even the guards who'd worked Belmarsh for years admitted something was different. Too organized, too quiet. On the morning of the marked date, prisoners were allowed out for a short exercise period under heavy supervision. The yard was tense. Groups stayed tight, as scanned constantly. Nobody relaxed. Then it happened, a sudden rush, shouts, prisoners scattering, officers charging forward as alarms blared across the complex. Smoke filled part of the yard, thick and choking. Someone had started a fire using contraband materials. It wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to distract. In the confusion, two prisoners made a break for another group. Guards intervened fast, but not fast enough to stop the violence completely. When order was restored, one man lay unconscious on the ground, blood pooling beneath his head. As he was carried away, a guard noticed something clenched in his hand, a folded piece of paper. Later, in a secure office, intelligence officers opened it carefully. What they read confirmed their worst fears. This wasn't random violence. It was planned, coordinated, and it wasn't finished. Because at the bottom of the page, beneath the list of names already crossed out, was one final line uncrossed, underlined, and marked with a single word: tonight. Night fell over Belmarsh with a weight that pressed down on every wing, the kind of quiet that didn't feel calm, only controlled. Cells were locked earlier than usual. Officers doubled patrols. Radios stayed live. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood the same thing. Something was coming. Prisoners lay awake listening to footsteps pass their doors. Each set slowed as it moved by, as if deciding whether to stop. Some men prayed. Others sat fully dressed on their bunks, backs against the wall, eyes fixed on the door. In Belmarsh, sleep can get you killed. The final name on the list belonged to a man who had managed to stay invisible since arriving. No gang, no enemies, at least none that showed themselves. He kept his head down, spoke to no one, and never asked questions. That alone made him suspicious. Officers moved him just before midnight. Not to segregation, but to another wing. The paperwork said routine transfer. In reality, it was a gamble. Leaving him where he was almost guaranteed violence. Moving him risked something worse. As guards escorted him through the corridors, alarms suddenly blared on the opposite side of the prison, shouting, doors rattling, a coordinated disturbance, timed perfectly. Officers hesitated. The radio crackled with conflicting orders, and the confusion. One escort fell back to respond to the alarm, for a few seconds. The prisoner stood with only one guard beside him. That was all it took. A door further down the corridor burst open. Figures moved fast, faces hidden by shadows, and hoods torn from clothing. The guard tried to react, but was tackled to the ground. The prisoner froze, realizing too late that the transfer hadn't saved him at all. By the time backup arrived, it was over. The attackers vanished back into their cells as alarms continued to scream. Officers found the man slumped against the wall, alive, but barely. He was rushed out under heavy guard, blood trailing across the concrete floor. The prison went into full lockdown. 4 days afterward, Belmarsh felt different, quieter, heavier. No one claimed responsibility. No weapons were found. Officially, the incident was logged as an assault by persons unknown. And officially, everyone knew the truth. The list had been completed. The man survived, but he was never returned to the general population. He disappeared into the system, moved, renamed. Buried behind layers of bureaucracy and steel. Some inmates believed he talked, others believed he hadn't needed to. What mattered was the message. Belmarsh doesn't forgive weakness. It doesn't forget fear. And it doesn't need witnesses. Months later, an inspection report would mention serious concerns about safety, staffing, and intelligence failures. Politicians would debate reforms. Officials would promise change inside the prison. None of that mattered, because when the doors locked each night, the rules stayed the same. Keep your head down, trust no one, and remember, survival in Belmarsh isn't about innocence or guilt. It's about lasting one more night. Belmarsh never really returned to normal after that night. It only learned how to hide its damage better. The lockdown eased slowly, wing by wing. Like a cautious animal testing the air after a fire, prisoners were allowed out for short periods. Always under watch, guards spoke less. Everyone noticed the new routine's extra counts. Longer searches, more eyes on the cameras. Officially, it was about safety, and officially, it was about control. Rumors filled the gaps where facts should have been. Some said the man on the list had been an informant long before he arrived. Others said he had seen something inside Belmarsh that wasn't meant to be seen. Corruption. Favors traded, warnings ignored. A few believed the list itself was never about him at all, that he was only the final message to the prison. Don't interfere. Don't talk. Don't survive by accident. Officers questioned inmates quietly. One by one, no one admitted anything. In a place like Belmarsh, silence isn't loyalty. It's self-defense. Those who talked too much found themselves isolated, searched constantly, or suddenly transferred. The system had ways of punishing without leaving marks. Weeks later, A guard failed to report for duty. He wasn't found hurt. He wasn't missing. He simply quit, left his badge and uniform in a locker and walked away. To outsiders, it looked like burnout. Inside the prison, it meant something else. Guards didn't leave like that unless they'd seen something they couldn't see around the same time. CCTV footage from the night of the coordinated disturbance was reviewed again, frame by frame. Analysts noticed something that had been missed before. A camera on one corridor had been pointed a few degrees off, just enough to miss a crucial doorway. Maintenance logs showed it had been adjusted earlier that week. By whom? No one could say. The implication was dangerous. If prisoners had help, even indirect help, then Belmarsh had a problem far bigger than violence. It had rot. The investigation slowed, then stalled. Files were reassigned. Questions stopped being asked. Senior staff reminded everyone that Belmarsh held some of the country's most dangerous individuals and that stability mattered more than answers. Inside the walls, prisoners felt the shift immediately. Violence dropped, not because things were safer, but because the message had landed. The gangs didn't need another list. They had already proven they could coordinate, distract, and strike under the highest security conditions in the UK. That kind of power doesn't need repetition. The man who survived the final attack was never mentioned again. His name didn't appear in reports. His cell was reassigned. To most inmates, he became a ghost, a reminder that you could do everything right and still be targeted. Years later, former prisoners would describe Belmarsh the same way, not as a place of constant chaos, but as a place of constant pressure, where violence didn't explode often, but when it did, it was precise. Where the worst threat wasn't the man shouting threats across the yard, but the one who said nothing at all. Belmarsh still stands, still fills its cells, still claims order. But among those who have lived inside it, the truth is simpler. The most dangerous thing about Belmarsh isn't the men it holds. It's what the prison itself teaches you to become. Quiet, hardened, and ready to survive at any cost.